so good to see you.
Oh, we are?
Okay.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming tonight. Virtual audience, thank you for joining us. We were removing some chairs from the front row because it really is kind of hard for the author to have. It looks like nobody came, right? Right. But I understand that Kelly has many friends and family here. And as a consequence, we have these incredibly cool cookies. I love the dachshund. I'm taking one home. I will never eat it. I'm just going to preserve it, which I think is wonderful. So for those of you who are new, I'm Barbara Peters. I'm the owner of the bookstore. This is our 35th and a half year. And I met Kelly last summer at Capital Crimes in London, where, ta-da, let me find it here. She autographed a copy of the British edition of her book, This Is Not a Game. So I read it on the plane coming home, so I knew when the book published now that it would be a great idea to have Kelly come and share her publication date with all of us. So thank you very much to her friends and family who brought the lovely refreshments and who are here. And thank you regular customers who come to me to debut author, which I think is always one of the most important things you can do. If you don't come to a first-time author event, you will never have bragging rights when they suddenly take off and become world famous and people say, how did you know? And you don't have to answer, I came for the dachshunds, but there we are. Anyway, so Kelly, welcome.
Thank you.
You're
Is this on?
I
Can you
think
guys
so.
hear me? Okay.
I have trouble getting gracefully into this chair because it swivels, but there we are. So Kelly and I have been out to dinner and had a little libation of our own, right?
We did. Not Gibson's, though. But
No, yours was stronger than mine. But anyway, so she's excited to be here with her friends and family to talk about her wonderful new book, This Is Not a Game. And as you can see, although I'm not sure, is this the final British cover?
No, that is just the proof cover. So in the UK, they make a separate cover for the early galley copy. So I think the official cover is much prettier than that, if I can be honest. Yeah.
But I think the American cover is very cool.
Yes, I love the
I
American
really
cover.
love that. Right. And I thought about trying to find, dress like a drink, but this one defeated me, although occasionally I'm able to do that. So, Kelly, tell us a bit about your becoming a writer, because people, I think, are always interested in how a new author comes to write a book, and even more, get it published.
Absolutely. So, well, I always wanted to be a writer when I was a kid, but I never actually thought that was a real job. So I did pursue a creative career, though. So I went into film and television, and I lived in LA for a number of years after growing up in Iowa. By the way, I should say, I know there's a lot of Iowa folks here tonight. Yeah. So I did.
And some from Chicago. Yay.
So I did have a creative career where I was working with writers and reading scripts, and actually I was a book scout in film, actually, for a bit. So I did have kind of story training, and I was always around writers, but I didn't write myself. And then the pandemic happened, and the first year I did nothing. My husband and I just basically watched Mad Men and ate and drank and did nothing. And then 2021 rolled around, and I just turned to him and I said, I am so bored. I have got to do something. And he actually suggested it. He said, you always talked about wanting to be a writer. Why don't you take a writing course? And I said, sure, that's a great idea. So I signed up for an online writing course with Curtis Brown Creative, who are an amazing UK company. And it was just this really low pressure, lovely environment where I just got to send, a few sample chapters of this idea that I had, this work in progress idea I had, and got good feedback on it. And then I would say about 6 months into that, I started taking it quite seriously. And I remember I said to my mom, actually, who's here, I said, I'm going to start treating this like a part-time job now. When I'm done with my workday, I am going to be focused on this, and I said the same thing to my husband. I said, I'm probably not going to be cooking or baking as much because I'm going to be busy. And he said, that's totally fine. And then this came together. That was a really long-winded answer. I'm sorry.
Actually, it was pretty short, I thought. No, it was absolutely fine. It is fairly miraculous that a first effort by an author, if you do this often enough, as we do sometimes twice a day, we look today and we've done 1,300 events in the last 3 years. all of which are going to be located in case you care or you want to share this one for Friends of Kelly. If you go to poisonpen.com, our website, you can click on the events thing, and then you will go to either Facebook or YouTube. And soon, since Facebook is changing its policy, we're going to have all of our events on poisonpen.com, and we can index them, which will be wonderful, so you don't have to search forever for an author. Now I've lost track of what I was thinking.
You were talking about a first effort kind of being...
Oh, right.
Yeah.
That many authors whom we present to you as debut authors, it's like their 7th book or their 4th book or something. It's fairly rare that the first book that somebody writes actually makes it into print.
Well, to be honest, I mean, I did spend my 20s and 30s reading thousands of screenplays and books, and I do mean thousands, and, working with writers to give feedback and help structure stories better. So in a way, I feel like I was always kind of doing a version of writing. I just wasn't actually literally writing, but yeah.
So I have some inside knowledge here, thanks to our drinks over dinner. And this book that emerged had considerable editorial input, which I hope that eventually you rejected. But how much of it made it into the book?
Editorial input from publishing editors or from just everybody? Yeah.
From agents and other,
from
other sort of
Well,
people.
let's see. Well, so... first and foremost, my mom, who is here. I don't see her, but she's here somewhere. Yes, my mom is my primary beta reader. And it's honestly unfair to even call her my beta reader. I mean, she is so amazing, and I bounce every single idea off of her. But she would definitely, I would say, be the first and foremost person who gave me editorial feedback. And then after that, I definitely got a fair amount of feedback from an agent. And then I ended up deciding to actually work with a different agent because I wanted to keep my vision. And then that agent, who is absolutely wonderful, supported me and gave me, actually she gave me the best note I've ever gotten, which was, she said, when she read the draft of the book that I had given her, she said, I think you just need to have fun. She was like, this is all good. The structure's in place. The plot's in place. Like, just do a pass where you have some fun. And I thought, oh, I like this woman. She's, she wants me to go just enjoy writing again. So I did that. And that was the version of the book then that we sold. And then I got great editorial feedback from my editors, actually. And I'm not just saying that because you're supposed to say that. I really actually have 2 fabulous editors.
Probably watching this.
And they're probably watching. But they really are great. And it worked out because my US and UK editors are friends. So that's nice. So they coordinated their feedback, which was lovely. That's not always the case.
But the challenge for an author, is to hang on to their own version of the book and not end up publishing somebody else's version of the book. And that's hard, especially at the very beginning. It's kind of hard to resist the idea that somebody knows your book better than you do.
Yep.
And sometimes they actually do. So, it's a tough line to walk. But the other thing that should be clear to you, having listened to this, when you do a first book, you have forever. I mean, half the time, nobody knows you're writing it. There's no pressure. You don't have a contract, whatever. Once you publish a book, and if it is successful, hi, we have chairs up in the front. Lure you up here, right? I knew we were going to end up. All right, so we might actually have to put 1 or 2 back. Yay. I love this. When I taught at ASU, I actually used to take out the front row after everybody sat in the back. It was so ridiculous. But anyway, we have to fill an hour, okay? And we can only talk about the book for roughly 10 minutes without giving away the plot, so we digress. Those of you who come regularly are used to this, but those of you who are new, do not expect this to stay on track, because it just won't. But I know I was going to say something profound. What was it? I'm 84, and so I do have some flexibility there. And go, oh, I know what it was. So I was talking about pressure. And, first novels sometimes take authors years, and they evolve, and there's no pressure and all. But once you publish a book and you have a contract, and especially if you're successful, there is relentless pressure to produce a second book. And it's a very different experience. I can also tell you that generally, although we can hope it is not true for you, second books do not do as well as first books. And it's like book 3 kind of it's like an S curve. You know, you're up here and then you sort of drop for the second book and then it begins to rise for the third. And then by the fourth, you're fine.
Right.
So don't take it hard if you find yourself.
I'll
And you
prepare.
might be the total exception to this rule, but I've had this conversation over the years with I flunked statistics at Stanford. I never did get the S curve, but it actually does apply, truly.
Well, and I mean, I do actually have, I could share a little breaking news, which is there is a book too. It's not a sequel to this book, but it's another murder mystery, a standalone that I'm doing that I just turned in. And I agree with your point that there is a lot of pressure. It's different when you're writing under contract. You feel like somebody's looking over your shoulder, and it's just there's I don't want to say it's less creative, but you just feel different when you're. It's not that that freeing feeling of, as you say, when you're just kind of writing without anybody knowing.
Well, and there's a weight of expectation from readers,
Yeah.
not to mention mom and family, that
Exactly.
make a difference. So you've also opened up another point, which is that oftentimes authors have to decide if they're going to write a series, which is to say bringing back characters that are in this first book, or if they're going to end the book. That's the story for those characters. Their story arc is completed, and then you're going to write something different. And there used to be enormous pressure to write sequels, but it's not so intense anymore. And, I don't think that this book demands a sequel.
But I want it to have a sequel.
You could do that.
I really want one. I want it to be demanded. I just love the characters so much. But yes.
Well, but you've already said you didn't do that, so.
Well, that because they have to see how the first one does. That's the key.
Got it. Well, you can do both. There are plenty
You're
of
right.
writers who write both series and standalones, which I think, I mean,
Absolutely.
we've been through the career of, the entire career of Michael Conley did his first ever event here at the Poison Pen, says he will do his last when he's ready to hang it up. And if I went through a list of all the authors who have started here, it would be astonishing.
Oh.
And I love the fact that they come back, despite the fact that we give you a hard time. Most of them show up again. And virtual audience, thank you, because your participation, it averages about 1,000 people watching this, not necessarily right now, but in the next day or two, and then more on YouTube. And I find that really great. You're right that it is an international audience. One of our most loyal viewers lives in Italy, and I worry that she's losing sleep because, Italy is like, it's 9 hours from now. I know. Anyway, so why Mackinac?
Well, since this is a locked room mystery, you have to, it's hard to trap people in a house. You've got to think about all the different ways that they could possibly escape and make contact with the outside world. So yeah, I thought, well, I should trap them on an island, and even better, an island that has a ban on cars like Mackinac. So that was why I chose Mackinac. And I also just knew it's this beautiful, idyllic place with amazing architecture. And I just thought, what a fun, milieu.
So I've been sort of careful to say that although Kelly lives in the UK, at least part of the time, if not most of the time, that she is American, so that people wouldn't say, why is a UK author writing about Mackinac? I call it Mackinac, but Mackinac is probably right. Island. And I was there. I've been there several times, but the last time I was there was the year before last.
Yep.
And there still is a driving prohibition.
Right.
And the hotel, the Grand Hotel, in theory, has the largest veranda in the world. It's this huge wraparound
It's beautiful.
to the Victorian building, and it has rocking chairs that people, fight over
Yes.
for. It's like, trying to get the best lounge by the pool.
Yes.
So an island is great, but why that particular island when you are surrounded by islands in England?
Right. Fair. I definitely wanted to set it in the U.S. I couldn't, even though I've been in the U.K. for 10 years, I can't imagine writing in British English and trying to pull that off and do British humor and all of that. I'm still American in my core. So definitely wanted it to be a Midwestern location and wanted it to be an island because of the locked room factor. And then, I just thought there was something charming about the automobile ban. And my main character, Mimi, it's only just a small spoiler, I'll tell you. She rides around on a snowmobile because they are allowed on the island. And her snowmobile is lavender, and it's called Joan Rivers. So, yeah.
Love that. I can remember the bicycle built for two thing because that's what you had to do. But here's the other great thing about Mackinac Island for a kind of book that Kelly's writing. There's serious weather at the top of Lake Michigan coming down from Lake Superior. And weather is an important part of your book.
Indeed. And I wanted to embrace the kind of Agatha Christie tropes that people expect from a murder mystery like this. So, part of me when I was writing this, I thought, okay, there's going to be a snowstorm. Is that a cliche? And then I thought, no, that's what people want. They want, to the suspects and the detectives to be, trapped in the country house. So, yes, we had a big apocalyptic kind of snowstorm roll in the story, but given the weather events there, as you say, it's actually fairly believable. So yeah,
it is believable. So you're talking about the Golden Age design or the Agatha Christie design. Do you want to explain that?
Yeah. So in the interwar period, people just really wanted escapism from their fiction. So Agatha Christie and her amazingly talented peers, not just Agatha, kind of created this body of work called the Golden Age of detective fiction. That's what it's called now. One of my other favorite authors from that era is Josephine Tey. If anybody's ever read The Daughter of Time, one of my all-time favorite books. And I just love the structure of whodunits from that era. It's just such a, I think that the constraints of it actually kind of force you to be super creative. And so I really kind of embraced those kind of classic murder mystery tropes with this, as others do too. Knives Out has done that. The movie Clue, my all-time favorite movie, has done that. So I like to play with tropes.
Okay, so here's the point. Then if you have a closed space that has an impermeable border, then everybody inside it can be a suspect if there's a murder, right? There aren't people coming in and out from the outside, which would make the detection very difficult. Yeah. And you have to decide if the people who are going to solve the mystery, whether it's Hercule Poirot or whatever, are already inside the country house when the blizzard strikes, or if they're going to be called in,
right,
like Inspector Japp, for example.
Absolutely.
And so you can take that and you can do it in a castle, you can do it on a cruise ship, you can do it in a theater. Right now, islands are hot. There have been like 11, I'm serious, we have had like 11 books here this winter, all of which are taking place on islands, which I think, Anne Cleves kind of pioneered that with Shetland, although Shetland was not impermeable. And now she's going to the Hebrides, bringing Jimmy back, which I love. But anyway, it's a construct, whereas a thriller opens it up, and what you have is a chase with people rushing across a landscape, and all kinds of bad players can come in.
Right.
And this kind of Golden Age thing, it's a very limited group, like Death on the Nile, for example, where they're all on a little riverboat going from Aswan, up the Nile. So only the people on the boat can be suspects for the murder of the person who's killed.
And that's what makes it so fun, because it really is like a puzzle then, because you find out the individual backstories of each suspect. And because you just have these finite options of who could have done it, I just think that makes it all the more fun. And my all-time favorite crime book is And Then There Were None, which also takes place on an island. So I admit, a lot of the inspiration came from that too.
You don't have to admit it. I think it's actually a really good thing. It's a great design to follow, and it's been it's held up for like 100 years.
It has.
Yep. So tell us about your characters.
So Mimi, the protagonist, is loosely based on my own grandmother, who I also call Mimi. When I started creating her, I felt like I had to call her Mimi. Let's see, the idea for the book actually came from when I went to stay with my grandmother during the pandemic. She fell and broke her ankle, actually. So I volunteered to go to where she lived, which was in this kind of lake community in the middle of nowhere, right in the middle of the craziness of the pandemic, and stayed with her for 2 weeks. And it just kind of occurred to me then, like, if we had to survive something high stakes together, the power went out at one point, and obviously she's injured. I just started thinking about all these scenarios, and I thought, that would be kind of fun if a grandmother-granddaughter sleuthing duo came out of this. And so I started that's where it started to percolate. So my grandmother is the basis for Mimi, but Mimi really is her own thing. I should say that. She's 79. She does what she wants. She says what she wants. She drinks. She smokes. She doesn't apologize for any of that. She's kind of the person I want to be. Like, when she talks to people and what she says, it's kind of the inner monologue that I have in my head all day that I'd like to be able to say. So I really genuinely love writing her. And her dialogue, I mean, she's still in my head. She is a living person in my head. And then the other character, the other main protagonist is Addie, and she is 30 years old, and she's a video game designer, and she's Mimi's granddaughter, and she's going through a lot. She's going through a breakup, and she's co-created a very successful murder mystery-themed video game called Murderscape. And when we meet her, she's dealing with the fallout of a breakup with her fiance, who has also basically stolen her work, and he's sold the video game to Microsoft without her. And she's very upset about it, but she's also doubting herself. You know, did I really create this? Maybe he really kind of did all the work. And she kind of works through some of those issues and some of her issues with Mimi while they're solving the murder.
You don't mean that a granddaughter has issues with her grandmother, do you really?
Indeed.
Oh, okay. Notice it's not with her mother, but her mother's here, right? So we have to be careful about that.
It was only just a little bit of a therapy book. No, it was fun to write.
So, okay, so here they are, granddaughter visiting grandmother living on Mackinac. So there's always what we call the instigating incident, i.e. what kicks off the actual plot.
So Mimi has this kind of socialite rival on the island named Jane Ireland, and she doesn't like Jane. She doesn't want anything to do with Jane, but Jane is always trying to be her friend, and she gets invited to this glamorous party at Jane's mansion, and Jane ends up dead. So that is our inciting incident. And we find out that she's been blackmailing Mimi. And I shouldn't say anything else.
No,
No
you
spoilers.
should stop there. But I mean, so that's a great setup.
It was very fun to write, and I because I come from film and TV world, I often picture like particular actors in my head. And for Jane Ireland, I did picture Jane Fonda, and that was very fun to write. I really would like die for her to play that character. She's just she's one of my favorites.
So, having said that, are you already looking at any kind of film or movie deal?
Not yet, but you know, I'm open to it.
Of course you are, right? The writer's strike. The writer's
Right.
strike has really thrown everything back maybe a couple of years. So there's an awful lot of material in the queue for TV and movie adaptations that stacked up first during COVID and then during the writer's strike. So
Indeed, it's a really tough market.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you're moving on to a different book, is there anything you'd like to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, I can talk about it a little bit. It's called A Murder in 8 Cocktails. Going with the cocktail theme.
I was going to say, did the cover
But,
inspire you?
It kind of did. It did a little bit. And it's a married couple sleuthing duo, but that's all I can say. But it's done. It's been written. So book 2 is done, which I still cannot believe. I cannot believe I have written 2 books. That is crazy.
So having said that, you might want to talk a little bit about how long it takes to actually get a book from the time it's accepted to get it published, because many of you may think it's instantaneous, but it actually can take 2 years.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, spent 2 years writing it while I had a full-time job. And then we submitted it to publishers in November of 2023. And I mean, it was pretty exciting. They basically bought it overnight, which was amazing. But today is the publication day. So there you go. It was basically a year and a half until it was published. And that's because you have to go through, the editing process, the copy editing process, the proofreading process, the cover selection process. And then, of course, there's also just their supply chain and needing to get the book printed, and you have to sign the special editions. I had to sign 2,600 British special editions. That was a lot. So all of those things kind of go into the process before the book hits shelves.
Right. In a book like this, current events are probably not going to change the story or change the outcome. But if you think about like somebody writing a contemporary thriller, by the time it gets into print, the whole world has changed. I mean, the whole world's changed in the last 3 months. So, I've been writing sympathy notes to people like Brad Thor and Daniel Silva, and I'll say, whoa. It would be very difficult right now not to see that your book might very well be out of phase by the time it publishes, because the time lapse is such.
Yes.
And and things are changing so rapidly.
I was nervous about that with regard to the video game aspects of the story because my main character, well, one of my main characters, Addie, is a video game designer. And, that technology is very quickly evolving and changing every day. So I was really careful to make it. I worked with a lot of gaming consultants, gaming people that I knew, to make sure that it was authentic. But I also didn't get too specific for that exact reason because I knew the book wouldn't come out for a while and I didn't want it to feel dated.
Yeah, sure. AI could really upend things. One of the things I learned a long time ago you have to be really careful about is if there's money involved, especially things like prize money. You should be pretty careful about the amount because that can date a book faster than anything. Somebody who was writing golf mysteries told me that years and years ago that he had the British Open prize was 2,000 pounds or something.
Right.
And by the time the book came out, it was already ridiculous. And by today, it's so, there's a point when if it becomes genuinely historical that you can get away with that. But there's so many things to think about in a world that is changing this rapidly about whether your book will date.
Absolutely. No, it's a really good point. And there's pop culture references in the book, and I thought about that too. I thought, oh, well, these feel dated by then, but I think if you stick to things that feel like they have a bit of a timeless quality somehow, then I think you're okay. But I hear you. I mean, especially just with book timelines, that is definitely a challenge.
So who do you think your readers are in the UK?
I mean, cozy mysteries do really well in the UK. I think there's maybe because of Agatha being from there. I feel like I feel like there's a pretty strong crime base in the UK. Is that what you mean, or? Yeah.
Well, cozy has a somewhat different definition.
Right.
In Britain, their idea of cozy is P.D. James, where they've slaughtered people in in the cathedral or something. Whereas in America, it's more about cat lovers.
Right.
So I'm sometimes really stunned by the British will send me something and advertise it as a cozy, and I think no, it really isn't.
Right.
But I mean, romanticy, as you know, has become a really big thing. And somebody asked, one of the big romanticy writers, might have been Rebecca Yarros. Anyway, they said to her, who do you think your audience is? And they were waiting for a completely different answer. And she said, bored housewives in Kansas. Because romanticy is about sex and dragons, but not sex with dragons. And bored housewives in Kansas probably like that. It's exciting. And so you do have to think about cultural differences.
Yeah.
So part of the question was, would UK readers take to your book differently than American readers?
That's a really, really good question. And I mean, it is interesting because my lead publisher is in the UK. So I guess honestly we'll have to see because a lot of the humor I think is quite American in it. So that's a really interesting point. But I do think it's a genre that does, Agatha Christie after Shakespeare and the Bible is the greatest selling author of all time. And over 50% of her works are actually published in other languages. So, it's got global appeal, that kind of setup, the whodunit setup.
It does. By the way, have any of you watched David Suchet and his TV's five different episodes called Travels with Agatha? And he followed Agatha Christie actually did in real life a trip for a British Empire exhibition in 1922, I think, which was unfortunate because that's when Archie met the woman he eventually divorced Agatha over, or she divorced him. But anyway, so they went to South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, and Canada, and took a little break to go surfing. I love this. Who would have guessed that Agatha was a surfer? Went surfing. They have actual show footage of Agatha on a surfboard in Hawaii. I just loved it. It was so. But David Suchet, who did 25 years of Poirot, lovely man. And it's kind of fun to see, how she's held up.
She has.
From 1922 all the way to today, that people are still interested. And
Absolutely.
It ends up in Greenway, her house in Devon, which I've been to. And anyway, I think it's remarkable that over 100 years later, that we are watching her, taking this journey and talking about her and her work. So you're right, that following in her footsteps literarily as well as actually is probably a winner.
Well, and I think it's because she really cared about entertaining people first and foremost. And that's what I mean, I genuinely care about that too. So, yeah, I just think it's it's just a fun escapist genre, whodunits. I think that's why people like it. And there's always a nice, well, hopefully nice, tidy ending, which I think people appreciate as well.
Think of all the British people who've never heard of Mackinac.
Right. Good
It'll
point.
be a surprise for them, right? Right. So, how about questions from any of you? Since we can't really talk about the book anymore, who would like to ask a question? I can digress further, but it would be better if you ask questions.
Hi, Kelly. My name's Bradley, and I'm a big fan. Is there anything in the book about dragons, sex, or Kansas?
Nope.
You were listening, weren't you? Thank you.
Nope.
Ah.
Oh my gosh. I don't know what to say. Hi.
When you start a book like this, do you really kind of plan it from beginning to end before you start writing?
I love that question.
And just let it flow.
Yeah. So the question was, do I outline and plan, or do I just kind of let it flow? And I definitely do the latter. So when I was writing the first book, this book, I didn't know what I was doing. So I would just have these kind of scenes pop into my head, and I would write them out. And eventually I kind of stitched them all together and kind of figured out the structure. And I thought, when I was starting my second book, oh, the way I did that was really kind of clumsy and messy. And with this book, I'm gonna outline, I'm gonna plan, I'm gonna do it the smart way. And I started to outline, and I got so bored. I set my laptop aside for like 6 weeks. I literally couldn't even go near it. And I thought, oh gosh, maybe I don't like my story, or I don't like my characters. And then I realized, actually, no, I liked my story, I liked my characters. I just didn't like the outlining process. So I went back to exactly what I did with this book. And I just started, honestly, in kind of like a stream of consciousness way, I just started creating scenes, and then later I stitched them together with the plot and the structure. And that might sound crazy, but it works for me, because I think I enjoy writing the atmosphere, the characters, the setting, the dialogue. That's really fun for me. And then doing the plotting, it's not that I don't enjoy that, it's just that that's something I kind of like to save for the end. Yeah. I put it together like a puzzle. Thanks for that question. Cool. All right.
Oh, we paralyzed you? Come on, guys.
Any questions from the online audience? Can they type in questions? Yeah.
Patrick, do we have any questions from, like, Stefania? I love Stefania. She has great questions. Patrick, can you hear me?
I'm here. Yep.
Oh,
on
there's
just
a
a
live
second.
question.
Hi.
Yeah, there was a question.
The biggest surprise, Kelly, in this whole process?
I think I was pleasantly surprised by how open and kind of collaborative the whole publishing process is. I thought it was going to be this very kind of top-down type experience where, they tell you the edits that you have to do, and it's kind of like, very dictatorial. Sorry, I'm losing my voice. No, it wasn't like that at all. It was honestly so respectful, so collaborative. And if there was ever a note that I didn't agree with, no problem. It was really pleasant. It was, I wouldn't say I was fearful of it. I just was kind of like a little bit reticent going into it. I didn't know what it was going to be like. And oh my gosh, the loveliest people, and they just love books and reading and writers, and they want you to make the best book that you can. So if you agree with note, great. I mean, they might push you on something if they don't necessarily agree with you pushing back, but mostly it's honestly very like open and warm, which has been lovely. So it was a pleasant surprise.
Patrick, you disappeared. Come back.
Yeah, there was somebody online who was just asking, are you writing full time now?
No, that's a good question. No, I still have a day job. I still work in entertainment, actually. But it's interesting because it's a creative job. So it does kind of feed into my writing process. There are, interesting people that I meet and conversations I have and brainstorms I'm in that kind of gives me energy to go home and write. So they do kind of feed off of each other a little bit. So yeah, I'm busy. I've got 2 jobs.
People are endlessly fascinated about the writing process. Every author is different.
Yeah.
Some work in the middle of the night, some work first thing in the morning. how do you get the words on the page? Do you have a schedule, a word count that you're shooting for? Or?
That honestly, I feel like I sound really chaotic in this interview because I've already said that I don't outline, but I don't have a set schedule. I really do I try to write 5 days a week. That's what I go for, but sometimes it's 5 a.m., sometimes it's 10 p.m. It just depends. Apologies. I might need to get a cough drop. But yeah, I will. But yeah, there's definitely, I think, for me, it's about when I have the energy to do it. I don't want to force it. And I think it does also have to do with having a day job as well. And now we're at a natural end because I'm losing my voice, guys. I don't want to cough. Yeah, no, I've got a cough drop, so I'm good. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Right. Does anybody else have a question they'd like to ask? Mom, we haven't heard from you. What would you like to contribute?
She knows everything about the book. She doesn't have any questions.
I don't know that you could really believe that, but okay. Authors that may have,
You asked Michael Conley when he first sat there.
it's a fabulous story. I wish that we could have had video then. Michael was absolutely terrified. He was a reporter. And we were in a much smaller bookstore for the first few years, so we had to gypsy up and down the street to a larger space. And so we were in a coffee shop called Expressions, which was over on Main Street, whatever it is. So Michael and his wife, and remember that, Patrick? And several people, did you come to that? That was before you came to work. It was before your time, right. So anyway, so Michael and I sat down, and he was shaking so badly that I put my arm around him, and we started talking, and he kept, his wife kept doing this, and so Michael decided that there was something, in his, I don't remember if he had a mustache, but anyway, she kept doing that, and he kept getting more and more worried that, there was like, his tongue was coated or what, and she was trying to get him to speak up because he has such a, I mean, the whole thing was, I'm really sorry that, this was 1993, so it was before all of this. We did our first virtual event in 1995 when P.D. James came to the store, and she had such an enormous crowd that it overflowed the library auditorium, and I did a deal with the Scottsdale television station if they would come down and broadcast from the inside to all the people that were standing outside, which was like 600 people, that they could then use the video. Well, she thwarted me because it was raining that day, and she showed up in her rain bonnet and her old boots and her old dress. She just looked terrible, and she never had time to do anything about it. So there she is in front of all the. So she said, as a condition of the video, that we could never show it to anybody. So we kept a pirate copy, and years later, Princess Alexandra and her husband came to the bookstore as part of a promotion between Arizona and the UK. And I thought, what can I possibly give Princess Alexandra that would be memorable? And then I thought, I could give her a copy of the P.D. James video, because even Phyllis, I thought, will not object. We got to be friends, and I used to have dinner with her in London and other things. She was great. But that was after Michael. So now when he comes, he's really cool, isn't he? He was just here, a couple of weeks ago. He was debuting a book with a couple of friends. And he'll be back in the fall, and he's dropping in to sign 500 books in May in the back. So we've been very, very lucky with Michael. There are a lot of great stories about first events. I just had, while I was waiting for you, I set up 4 events on my phone with authors who want to come. And one of them has just gotten his books to sign for us because it's going to be a virtual event. And he took a picture of the title page, and he asked me where he should sign it. Should he sign it under his name or above the publisher logo? You have no idea the kinds of things that come up when you're doing this. I love it. I told him to sign it between his name and the title, but that's the kind of.
Have you seen all these authors? What do you have as a suggestion today?
What do I have as a suggestion about what?
For Kelly today.
Oh, I think Kelly's doing great. Keep on doing what she's doing. If there's no joy in it for a writer, I think you as readers recognize that. There are many people who write probably longer than they should, and you can kind of tell. And there are other writers like John Sanford, who was here recently. What book is it? It was like book 60 or something. And anyway, it might be the most original book he's ever written. And, so any author that has a long-term, writes over the long term, not every book is going to be great. Some of them you won't like the plot or whatever. You have to admire the whole body of work as a fan, even with dragons. You have to go for that. I got a proposal today to have something. There's a new category called cozy romantasy, in which there is a dragon but no sex, which I just love. In part, publishing is just hilarious. Yes, sir.
What's your plan for book 3? When you start that?
I love it.
Did you receive any input or quasi-pressure to change your ending, your outcome?
Oh, that's a good
That's a
question.
great question.
So there was a time when someone was trying to change, I don't want to give too much away, but it was kind of like the storyline with a particular suspect, and that would have then affected the ending. And I pushed back quite strongly on that because I knew that astute readers would have immediately picked up that that person was the killer then. So we had to have that chat. But other than that, and that was actually, that was not with my editors, that was with a previous agent that chat happened. And then on book 3, I do want it to be the sequel to this. So hopefully, fingers crossed, that happens. And I've already got the setup for that in my head. I want to hang out with Addie and Mimi again. They're my friends. So that would be nice.
Isn't that great about being an author, that you're never alone?
It's true. I'm always with my cats and with my characters. It's true.
Does anybody have a final question? Yes.
Are there any book club discussion questions?
Ooh. Well, I know. So you mean like that the publisher provides? Is that what you mean?
Or you yourself?
Gosh, I haven't actually been asked that before. That's a really interesting idea. I know that Dutton, the U.S. publisher, has done kind of a book club kit that they've sent out to folks that has some book club discussion questions, but I haven't thought about questions myself. I should. I like that idea.
Yeah, well, there's a whole book club network, and
Right.
There are many books now that come with a set of questions inside. Do you belong to a book club?
Oh. I'd be
Oh.
honored to join via Zoom or in person. We
You
can
can do
have
that.
the discussion live. Let's do it. Yeah.
Since
Aw.
you've been here, you should be able to ask the questions now.
That's right.
And you could actually play the video. So that would work out well. I think it's great that there are so many book club,
great.
where people get together and have a sense of community and something to talk about that's not divisive or controversial. Yeah, it's wonderful. Well, thank you all very much
Thank
for your
you.
attention. Let's give Kelly a round of applause.
Thank you all.
And now, Jen, did we do numbers tonight? You have numbers in your books? Okay, how many? 13? Okay. What I'd like to do to thank you all